Happy Friday, everybody. We are going to finish the rest of the story today. We have 3 more chapters left to finish Fantastic Mr. Fox. So yesterday we finished off with somebody walking downstairs in the secret cider cellar. And I asked you to predict who you thought it was going to be or what you thought was going to happen next. Okay, so last bit, let's find out who it was and let's find out what happens next. Do those foxes get to have that nice feast or do they get caught? Chapter 16, The Woman. Quick, said Mr. Fox, hide! He and Badger and the smallest fox jumped onto a shelf and crouched behind a row of big cider jars. Peering around the jars, they saw a huge woman coming down into the cellar. At the foot of the steps, the woman paused, looking right and left. Then she turned and headed straight for the place where Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox were hiding. She stopped right in front of them. The only thing between her and them was a row of cider jars. She was so close. Mr. Fox could hear the sound of her breathing. Peeping through the crack between 2 bottles, he noticed that she was carrying a big rolling pin in one hand. Is that what you guessed? How many will he want this time, Mrs. Bean? The woman shouted, and from the top of the steps the other voice called back, Bring up 2 or 3 jars. He drank 4 yesterday, Mrs. Bean. Yes, but he won't want that many today because he's not going to be up there for more than a few hours longer. He says the fox is bound to make a run for it this morning. It can't possibly stay down that hole any other day without food. The woman in the cellar reached out and lifted a jar of cider from the shelf. The jar she took was next but one to the jar behind which Mr. Fox was crouching. I'll be glad when that rotten brute is killed and strung up on the porch, she called out. And by the way, Mrs. Bean, your husband promised I could have the tail as a souvenir. The tail's been shot to pieces, said the voice from upstairs. Didn't you know that? You mean it's ruined? Of course it's ruined. They shot the tail but missed the fox. Oh, heck, said the big woman. I did so want the tail. You can have the head instead, Mabel. You can get it stuffed and hanging in your bedroom. Hurry up now with that cider. Yes, ma'am, I'm coming, said the big woman, and she took a second jar off the shelf. If she takes one more, she'll see us, thought Mr. Fox. He could feel the smallest fox's body pressed tightly against his own, quivering with excitement. Will 2 be enough, Mrs. Bean, or shall I take 3? My goodness, Mabel, I don't care, so as long as you get a move on. And 2 it is, said the huge woman, speaking to herself now. He drinks too much anyway. Carrying a jar in each hand and with the rolling pin tucked under one arm, she walked away across the cellar. There they are hiding from the woman with the rolling pin. At the foot of the steps she paused and looked around, sniffing the air. There's rats down here again, Mrs. Bean. I can smell 'em. Then poison them, woman, poison them. You know where the poison's kept? Yes, ma'am, Mabel said. She climbed slowly out of sight up the steps. The door slammed. Quick, said Mr. Fox, grab a jar each and run for it. Rat stood on his high shelf and shrieked. What did I tell you? You nearly got nabbed, didn't you? You nearly gave the game away. You keep out of here from now on. I don't want you around. This isn't my place. You, said Mr. Fox, are going to be poisoned. Poppycock, said Rat. I sit up here and watch her putting the stuff down. She'll never get me. Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox ran across the cellar, clutching a gallon jar each. Goodbye, Rat, they called out as they disappeared through the hole in the wall. Thanks for the lovely cider. Thieves, shrieked Rat. Robbers, bandits, burglars. Chapter 17, The Great Feast. Back in the tunnel they paused so that Mr. Fox could brick up the hole in the wall. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks back in place. I can still taste that glorious cider, he said. What an impudent fellow Rat is. He has bad manners, Badger said. All rats have bad manners. I've never met a polite rat yet. And he drinks too much, said Mr. Fox, putting the last brick in place. There we are. Now, home to the feast. They grabbed their jars of cider and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smallest fox came next, and the badger last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turning that led them to Bunce's mighty storehouse, past Boggis's chicken house number 1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew Mrs. Fox would be waiting. "Keep it up, my darlings," shouted Mr. Fox. "We'll soon be there. Think what's waiting for us at the other end. And just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That ought to cheer up Mrs. Fox." Mr. Fox sang a little song as he ran. "Home again swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she's gotten some cider inside her inside." Then the badger joined in. "Oh, poor Mrs. Badger," he cried, "so hungry she very near died." There they are, all carrying the cider back. "But she'll not feel so hollow, if only she'll swallow some cider inside her inside." They were still singing as they rounded the fine ill corner, burst in upon the most wonderful and amazing sight any of them had ever seen. The feast was just beginning. A large dining room had been hollowed out of the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. They were Mrs. Fox and 3 small foxes, Mrs. Badger and 3 small badgers, Mole and Mrs. Mole and 4 small moles, Rabbit and Mrs. Rabbit and 5 small rabbits, Weasel and Mrs. Weasel and 6 small weasels. The table was covered with chicken and ducks and geese and ham and bacon, and everyone was tucking into the lovely food. Look at that! It's like a lovely feast. In they come with the cider, and everybody's already started the feast. How lovely. "My darling," cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox. "We couldn't wait. Please forgive us." Then she hugged the smallest fox of all, and Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amid shouts of joy, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember, no one is eating a thing for several days. They were ravenous, so for a while there was no conversation at all. There was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the other animals attacked the succulent food. At last, Badger stood up. He raised his glass of cider and called out, "A toast! I want you to all stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox." "To Mr. Fox!" they all shouted, standing up and raising their glasses. "To Mr. Fox! Long may he live!" Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said, "I don't want to make a speech. I just want to say one thing. And it is this. My husband is a fantastic fox." Everyone clapped and cheered, and then Mr. Fox himself stood up. "This delicious meal," he began. Then he stopped. In the silence that followed, he let fly a tremendous belch. There was laughter and more clapping. "This delicious meal, my friend," he went on, "is by courtesy of Messrs. Boggis, Bunce and Bean." More cheering and laughter. "And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have." He let fly another colossal belch. "Better out than in," said Badger. "Thank you," said Mr. Fox, grinning hugely. "But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow and the next day and the days after that. If we go out, we'll be killed, right?" "Right," they shouted. "We'll be shot before we've gone a yard," said Badger. "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you that. We are all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to 3 of the finest stores in the world." "We do indeed," said Badger. "I've seen 'em." "And you know what this means?" said Mr. Fox. "It means that none of us ever need to go out in the open again." There was a buzz of excitement around the table. "I therefore invite you all," Mr. Fox went on, "to stay here with me forever." "Forever!" they cried. "My goodness, how marvellous!" And Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit, "My dear, just think, we're never going to be shot at again in our lives." "We will make," said Mr. Fox, "a little underground village with streets and houses on each side, separate houses for badgers and moles and rabbits and weasels and foxes. And every day I'll go shopping for you all, and every day we will eat like kings." The cheering that followed this speech went on for many minutes. Look how happy they all are, knowing they don't have to go out and worry about being shot. They've got it sorted under there. Chapter 18, still waiting. Uh-oh, I've just seen this picture. I forgot about those farmers. Outside the fox's hole, Boggis and Bunce and Bean sat beside their tents with their guns in their laps. It was beginning to rain. Water was trickling down the necks of the three men into their shoes. "He won't stay down there much longer now," Boggis said. "The brute must be famished," Bunce said. "That's right," Bean said. "He'll be making a dash for it any moment. Keep your guns handy." They sat there by the hole waiting for the fox to come out. And as far as I know, they're still waiting. Still there waiting. So, the fox, even though we know it's wrong to steal, the fox had to go and get some food to help keep his family and all of the other families alive. They weren't doing the wrong thing by killing. That's what those farmers were going to try and do. But it ended like that, with the farmers still sat there in the rain. Little did they know, Fox wouldn't be coming up, would he? Because he sussed it out. Okay, your last activity today is my favourite one. And it is to retell the story. Okay, so once we've read a story, it's important to make sure that we really understood it and retell it in our own words, okay? You can use the book to help you, but I want this to be in your own words. So your job is to create a storyboard. Now, we have done a bit of this at school before, so you might remember. If you can't remember, I had a go at making one myself. So you need to get a big piece of paper. I got two A4 pieces of paper and stuck them together for mine because I couldn't find an A3 piece of paper at home. But you might just want to use one A4, that's fine. And I split my piece of paper up, if you can see, down the middle there, and then 3 ways that way. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes, okay? And I've retold the story, part of the story in each box. So you need to draw a picture and then write. Draw a picture and then write in your own words. So if you look at my first one, I've drawn a picture of the 3 farmers and Mr. Fox at the top, and then I've written a little bit for myself. Next one, I've drawn a picture of the farmer's plans. They got his tail, they tried to dig, and they got the tractors, and I've written about it. Next picture, Mr. Fox in the chicken house. Next one down here, the woman coming in. And then I've got the feast, got them all around the table within the feast. And then the last one is the farmers sat out in the rain, still waiting. Okay, so your job is to create one of these, create your own storyboard. Whatever pictures, you don't have to copy, you don't have to use my pictures. You might pick different parts of the story that you want to do. Draw your picture and then write underneath. Colour your pictures in, make it your own. The story of Fantastic Mr. Fox. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the story. That's one of my favourite Roald Dahl stories, so I'm happy that I got to read that for you. And enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye!